Hi, everyone, and welcome to Connected Human Conversations. Tonight, we're so lucky we have Kelly Bryant here with us. He's going to join our discussion. For you that have been here before, thank you for joining us again. We love having you and hearing your opinions and what you're thinking through the comments. And if you're new here, well, welcome in. My name is Nancy Barrows, and I am one of the co-hosts of the show. And we are going to be discussing tonight unconditional love. So when this topic came to me, there were so many places it could go, right? A million places where you can go with unconditional love. But I the more I sat with it, the more what kept coming through to me was the whole self-love, unconditional love for yourself first, right? Before we all say this, you have to love yourself before you can love someone else. And I don't think that's untrue, but I think we make it sometimes nearly impossible to love ourselves. And the piece that came up for me on that one was this whole, like, our standard for ourselves, like what it needs to be, what it must be for us to love ourselves, right? And this, we wouldn't hold anyone else to this standard, and was starting to think about, well, what is that standard, right? What do we say we need, must, should be in order to deserve that love? So I'm going to open it with that. And Mike, Kelly, if you guys want to jump in and just give your thoughts, that'd be great. And then we can, sort of continue the discussion as we go.
So your question is, what is it that we tell ourselves we need, must, should be in order to be deserving of love?
Yes. Our own love, much less anyone else's.
Mm-hmm. I've always felt like I have to be doing something. I have to have done something. I have to be either productive or giving, or, like I have to do something. That love is a response to something that I have done for someone, right? It's the result of my actions.
I'm listening. Cats are trying to kill one another.
Uh-oh.
Got hissing. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's that, and that's not, that's like,
right. Like, what am I doing?
Unconditional love, right?
Right. What are you doing to deserve it? What have you done to earn it? Kind of piece. Yeah. And that's definitely part of what's on my list. How about you, Mike? Oh, hello, so delicious. Hello, friend.
Hey.
Are you joining with your thoughts, Mike, or should we give you a minute?
No, you're fine. For me, okay, so where it started, right? Like, obviously, like I've said many times, I've never even loved myself until last year, right? Like, I didn't even know what that meant. I had no concept of it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't grasp it. Big feet, stop. So I just never grasped it. I never understood what it meant to love myself. Like, I just didn't. I was so emotionally numb, and in so many ways, I spent so much of my life hating myself that I never understood what it even meant. And for me, it was backwards, right? For me, I'm a very backwards person, so for me, it was just backwards. I needed to have somebody. I needed to have somebody in my life that I needed to learn how to unconditionally love, to start unconditionally loving myself, because I had no idea what it meant. Everything in my whole life was conditional. Everything. Like, that's how I was raised. I love you too. Can you go finish your food?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna take away your iPad.
But I want to sit on my lap.
You want to sit on my lap? Okay, so sit on my lap. It's, for me, it was that process, right? It was, I needed to find an example.
Hi, Teddy.
I needed to find an example of how to do it and why to do it, right? Because I never thought I was worth it. I mean, I had no self-worth, no value, personally. And it's still something I'm working on, right? So it's a process for me.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I really needed to find a reason to learn how, and that's what I did. And that's what happened throughout this process over the last year of my life, is that I found a reason to learn how. And then when I started doing the real deep work, right? Like, She's trying to give me bunny ears. When I started doing.
Speaking of unconditional love, thank you, Sid.
That's
We
it.
appreciate you setting the bar.
And Brian, you're definitely small enough to sit on my lap, bud. It'll be like Santa Claus. It's one of those. Shh. I'm trying to have it.
Did he freeze?
Go ahead.
No, not for me, but if you're person. Oh, good cover.
So as I've learned that, and I've learned how to love myself through all the work I've done and continue to do daily, it's still a tremendous learning process for me, because I'm still learning something new every day, right? And self-love for me is self-care, it's self-respect, it's living into my core values, right, which I do not waver from anymore. Under any circumstances, being hyper-acute self-awareness, because it's given me a way to make sure that I stay fully aligned. Those are things to me that keep me at my core. Under any circumstances, I will sacrifice short-term anything for, staying within myself.
Right. So again, and interesting how you didn't have any sort of way to know you loved yourself. Kelly and I, one of the places we are, like, my worth is my to-do list. If I put something on the to-do list and 19 get done, somehow I failed. I'm less than. I bombed. If I'm sitting on the couch, I'm lazy. I'm not restoring. I'm lazy. Right. Having to change that mindset. And I started to jot down a couple of things. It's like, often, and not so much now, but I think for a lot of people, perfection. Like, you need to be perfect if you're going to love yourself, right? You deserve self-love if you know all the answers and you never make any mistakes and you can control your emotions and you physically, meet the standard of what you want to look like or feel that people respond to. And it's all of this place of living to a standard that we don't hold anyone else to, right? Yet we're willing to hold ourselves to and allow ourselves to fail every day and feel bad about it. But it's also this place of, it's just totally unachievable. So do you really want to love yourself, or do you not really want to love yourself? Because that's unachievable. And, all of us know, it's what you go through that you grow through, right? It's the places where you allow the feeling. It's the places where you make the mistake. It's the places where it didn't go the way you had planned it that really bring us to being our best selves. And we don't allow ourselves that grace. I actually had this notion that, like, Kelly, for me, like, you can be my self-love mirror. We are so similar.
Yeah.
We've experienced so many things, right? And so why do I have endless unconditional love for you, right? That is so deep and yielding and unshakable, but I can't do that for myself necessarily. When someone who's so much like me and someone I admire, and it would be the kind of person I'd want to be, right? not be able to look at that person and be a mirror for myself of like, yeah, but why can I do it for her, but I have a harder time doing it for me?
And I love that you say that, being a mirror for each other, because that is so important. I think that on every level that we find people who are mirrors for ourselves, that recognize I can love this person unconditionally. Especially in our situation, for being people that are so similar, I can have grace and understanding and zero judgment and unconditional love for this person who's me, right? But then I think we also have to look into it and say, like almost dig deeper. Why is it that I have felt this way? Why is it that I only feel like I'm deserving of love if I'm accomplishing something, or if I've done something? What is that? Where does that come from?
I don't think it's unique to you and I, and maybe people in comments can tell me, but I do wonder if some of it is tied to trauma.
Yep.
So I spent a lot of time needing to look a certain way so that no one would notice me, right? This picture that I created that this meant that no one would look at me because I'm doing well, and I'm social, and I smile, and I laugh, and I'm happy, and I'm president of the class, and I'm captain of the volleyball team, and hey, right? There's no reason to look at me. And so I wonder if that is in part, right, and maybe it doesn't only come from trauma, but this place of who I put into the world, right, was the person that people loved. And not consciously, not that conscious, like, oh, this is, but like, no, everyone responded to, loved, wanted to be around the person I put into the world who was doing all this stuff. And like I said, I don't know, you and I,
this is my forward-facing self, right? This is the mask I put on, or, what the highlight reel. This is what I put forward to the world, and this is what the world responds to in a loving, encouraging way. So I must be this, I must continue to do this, because this is what gets the response that I think I need and want.
Right. And if you're coming from a place of inside, not like growing up, I wasn't loving myself for sure. Mm-hmm. And for many years was not. And so, what I was doing measured my worth of being loved, and that became my standard for myself. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm trying to clarify it, but you're right on where I'm trying to say, but it was sort of this adopted scale that, mm-hmm. And the belief that if people really knew who I was and what was going on in my world, that they wouldn't love me. I was unlovable. Like, I was disgusting, and I was, repulsive and offensive. So again, digging deeper, why do I struggle with that? It's conditioned. Do I do a better job with it now more than ever? Yes. But I don't think we're alone in having this place of judgment for ourselves that we would never, ever put onto the people we love.
No. Yeah. I love that you articulated that so well, and especially that, I'm sitting here going, well, did my family put that on me? Was it I only got love from my parents when I did this and this, or whatever it is. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be that. That wasn't the case in my life and my family. I didn't have to perform in order to receive love and praise from my family, but there is that real trauma aspect of this, that you feel like, well, if you really knew me, if you really knew what was going on in my life, then you wouldn't be able to love me.
Right.
So let me present something else.
So I want to say something. Like, Brian made a comment earlier that you need to love yourself before you can love anyone else. I don't think that's true. I don't believe that. I truly do not believe that. I think before you can truly understand the capacity of love and what love is, you need to love yourself. But I think you can show love without loving yourself.
But I think there's a different thing than showing love and actually, like, truly, like, we're talking about unconditional love, right?
So here's the thing. I never loved myself until last year. I unconditionally love my children no matter what. And I know for a fact I didn't unconditionally love myself. There's 1,000,000%, and I still don't think I do.
Is that dynamic different? Like, that love, that with children? I mean, I don't have any children. I don't have children, so I don't know.
But why does it have to be? If you have that capacity for your child, why can't you have it for somebody else? I don't think you have to unconditionally love yourself before you can unconditionally love somebody else, but you also need to understand what it means and what it truly, truly, deep-rootedly means, which is the example that I've had over the last year, before I could even get close to unconditionally loving myself, because I didn't know what it meant, because every love I had my whole life was conditional. And yes, I always seeked out love by bringing value, right? That's what I thought it was, by bringing value to the table. What is my worth? What am I bringing to the table to make something beneficial or not, right? Like, what am I doing, or how am I helping somebody? How am I helping them build their business without asking for anything in return? How am I, doing these things, right? Now what I do is I choose where to put my energy, and I make a conscious decision where I'm going to channel my unconditional love and energy to. When I offer to help somebody, That's with pure intent, and that's with my unconditional loving energy at my purest core, right? So I love myself. Not if we had Twitch, Kenny. Not if we had Twitch. You bring
Well,
that.
and
You
you know,
bring that, Kenny.
what you're saying, I think, Brian put a comment. He didn't say unconditionally love yourself, right? That was part of what we're talking about. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I believe, like, I don't have to unconditionally love myself, which isn't the goal, but I have to truly love myself. Like, I could love someone else and feel like I'm truly deeply in love with them and love them unconditionally and accept them unconditionally. But can I truly do that without allowing myself to be in my truest space, right? I certainly can't be loved unconditionally. And what kind of conditions do you put on love? There's the people in my life that I know. I have a friend that we make plans, she's going to flake every time. I love her unconditionally. That's not a reason for me not to like her. That's a place where I've accepted that that's who she is, right? And it's not hurting me. I know what it is. I don't take it personally. So I can still have unconditional love for her. And I think that might be the difference. Is like, can I unconditionally love myself? Do I need to unconditionally love myself before I can love someone else? I don't know that there's a whole 100% connection there, but to me, there feels like there is something there about being able to love yourself, to truly allow your heart to love someone else,
and be accepting of love from someone else. Right?
That's where I think the difference is. I think we can give love. I think that we can show love. I think we can feel love for others before loving ourselves. We will not allow ourselves to receive love only to the level that we love ourselves. So if we just love ourselves conditionally, then that's the only kind of love we're going to receive. I promise you, my parents, my sister, my family did not love me conditionally.
Yeah.
They loved me unconditionally, but I didn't love me unconditionally, so I couldn't receive it. I shut it down. They never went out of their way to make me feel less than, to do any of those things. Yeah, I had the trauma, but at some point that trauma stopped, and I never pulled myself back from that when it did. At that point, I was already broken and shut down, right? So for me, I can show love. I can show as much love as I want without conditions, but I couldn't receive it until I truly loved myself that way. We can only receive what we show ourselves.
Right. And I think that's where this unconditional piece comes. Like, I can love, but I'm not receiving it. And that there's a big difference. But I also think if I'm unable to receive love, that there's a piece of how I love other people that's missing. I'm not saying that I don't love them, but I think there is a bit that is missing there. And I think that our ability to allow people to love us, right, is really important, and it is different. Like, I can love other people without the same standard that I apply to myself. I can connect with people that way. But again, what happens when, and this isn't necessarily about unconditional love only, what happens then when, okay, I love you unconditionally, but I don't allow you to love me unconditionally? Where does that go? And really, what is unconditional love? Like, what is unconditional love? We accept each other's flaws. Do we accept our own flaws? Do we, find love and grace for people we've never met, right? And find love for them, unconditional love for them in the ways that they need it. There's a piece here to me that's connected, and I'm not articulating it well. I definitely in my life had loved people before loving myself. But again, there was this, like, it's like the safety glass was in the middle of, like when you go to the bank or something, that thick safety glass was between me and the person. And while I could love them unconditionally, I don't know if they felt it the same way.
Mm-hmm. It's like there's this other level of connection that we know is possible if we're truly unconditionally loving ourselves and others without that barrier in between, right? Without that barrier of condition or expectation or whatever it is. Like we know, and we're recognizing that I can show someone love and I can receive love on some level, like some version of it, right? But I can't truly experience unconditional love without loving myself, and vice versa, right? That there's the layers to this, that the more we allow others in, the more we love ourselves, the more we allow others in, and the better we are at loving others.
Right. And honestly, for me, the place of, can I unconditionally love others? Yes. Do I always do that? No. Right. That's not, I'm not sitting here saying that, like, no, I do it. I do it all the time. And, I've got this down pat. I don't love unconditionally all the time. I'm capable of it, but that's not necessarily what happens all the time. And, that place of like, okay, well, can you start off loving unconditionally and you think you really do love unconditionally, but what happens the first time that person hurts you? That person disappoints you. That person doesn't show up, right? Can you maintain that same level, right? That really, truly unconditional love of, well, there was an expectation there, because if you disappointed me, there was an expectation there. There was something that I, had put in my head that you needed to do in order for this to be unconditional love.
So it's conditional. So,
right.
But
it's unconditional. And then what happens the first time someone, disappoints you, hurts you?
But that's why I'm saying that what I've gone through this last year has truly taught me what it means. And am I perfect? No, I'm not. I'm not perfect. I fuck it up at times. I do it all the time, right? I make mistakes. And it's nowhere near perfect. And there's times where it's not unconditional. But my truest intent is to be unconditional, and it is closer to being unconditional than it has ever been in my life with anyone else.
Yeah.
But it's also teaching me how to handle myself better. Because by having that example of a living example of what I'm working through and trying to be for somebody else, it's showing me how to do it for myself. It's showing me how to strive for it for myself. I don't judge myself as harshly as I used to. I turn my over-analytical mind into my hyper-acute awareness because it's a positive spin. Like I reframe now. I'm trying not to beat myself into the ground and get, really shit all over myself. I still have moments. Don't get me wrong. There is moments. 3 kids alone in the woods, pretty much, when I get tired, it beats me up, right? Like it just does. I'm like a gremlin. If I'm up past dark, I'm in deep shit. But like, it's all part of it, right? This is learning. This is an ever evolutionary process that never ends. This is something that all we can do is our best foot forward. We all have opportunities in our life to have a living example in front of us. How we choose to use that example is on us, right? Like, there's friend unconditional love. There's romantic unconditional love. There's different ways to look at this. Can we accept people for exactly who they are? Because if we can't accept people for who they are, then we're not accepting ourselves for who we are. Because this is an inward-outward thing. Because we're reflecting out to the world what we have inward.
And do we falter? Do we fall out of that place of unconditional love when the person you're extending it to reflects back to us something we don't like about ourselves, right? Or some place that just, right, if I can't accept it in me, can I accept it in someone else?
For me, that's about accountability. If you own it and you say, oh, look, I screwed up. I took this personally. That's not unconditional. And you own it. You truly just own it. You go to the person and you own it. Even if it doesn't make sense to the person. It doesn't matter because you're not accountable to them. You're accountable to you. You don't have to be accountable to anybody else.
But your thing is you need someone else to love. So you like, is that being accountable? Like you're learning how to unconditionally love with unconditionally loving another person and seeing through that how you could do it for yourself.
I don't need it today, but I needed it to understand what I needed. Does that make sense? I needed it to happen to understand how to do it for myself. I don't need it today to continue to.
Right.
I just didn't understand what it meant before I had the opportunity to see what it means. I never understood it. How could I understand it?
So
I shut down at 5 years old emotionally.
like, what does it mean? Because, we talk about being disappointed by people or, expectations and whatever. Like, let's really practically, like, so if I say I'm unconditionally loving someone, but then they do something that disappoints me, does that mean I'm not loving them unconditionally? Like let's lay it out there and say what it really means. Like, what does it mean to love unconditionally, and what does that look like?
Okay, so for me, the way that I look at unconditional love is when I love and embrace somebody's flaws as much as I embrace and love somebody's qualities. When I can literally love their flaws as much as I love their qualities, their best assets. That to me is unconditional love. When I can accept them for exactly where they're at and who they are. Does it mean that I'm perfect with it? Does it mean that I never get disappointed? Does it mean that I never feel bad for what they do to themselves? No. But what it means is that I truly accept them for who they are. And yes, I might pout, I might stomp, I might bitch and moan, but I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still by that person's side through thick and thin, and I'm still there to pick them up off the ground when they fall on their face. And to me, that's unconditional love. I don't think love means that it has to be perfect. Love doesn't mean that you can't make a mistake. It doesn't mean that you can't drop it for a moment, put your own ego involved, get upset, and then pull your head out of your ass, move your ego out of the way, and go back to where you were. It just means you own it when you do it. You just hold yourself accountable to yourself. And you own it. At least that's what it means to me, right? Like, that's my perspective of it. And that's all I can speak on, because I don't think there is a right definition.
I don't think there is a right or wrong, right? Everybody experiences it differently. And like, to your end, Kelly, disappointment means there was an expectation, right? So I am holding someone to some standard with expectations on how you are going to show me love, how you're going to make me feel loved, how you are going to love me. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, there's a place for unconditional love, and maybe there isn't sometimes, and not in this example per se, but like maybe there's a place where it's like, no, you're not giving me anything and you're continually hurting me, and all these things, I can no longer unconditionally love you. My heart can't stand it, my spirit can't stand it, my energy is really suffering here. And to what the point I was saying before is, okay, so is it unconditional love? I have an expectation, right? And you don't hold to that. If I haven't shared with you, right, how I feel loved, what that
expectation is. Yeah.
Right. What that expectation is like, okay, you love me. And it's like, there's all the talk about the love languages. It's sort of like, well, you could do a million things for me, but if you didn't say you love me, then you don't love me kind of place. And so my mind's going in a million different directions, of course. So it's like that whole, is it unconditional or is it uncommunicated? And then I even lost what the other piece was. So hopefully somebody remembers it where I went first. Oh, that unconditional love, there isn't always a place. Like, there's got to be a place where you say, there's some self-love, self-preservation, trust in the journey, trust in people on their own journey.
Yes.
To do it themselves, that we can't step in, or maybe we can't sacrifice ourselves for someone else.
But does that mean you don't love them unconditionally, or does that just mean, can you love someone unconditionally and say, you're not meant to be in my life, or you're not meant to be in my life in this capacity? I still love you unconditionally, but I can't be with you, or I can't be friends with you, or whatever it is. I still love you. I have all the respect. I wish you the best. I have like whatever, but within my energetic space, this doesn't work. This doesn't fit because we're not aligned or whatever it is, Or is that meaning you're loving them only conditionally?
I mean,
I think the only one that can answer that is yourself, right?
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, the only one that can tell you how you love somebody is yourself. And it shows through how you show love, right? Just because you take a step back from somebody else's, from somebody else's path, doesn't mean that you don't unconditionally love them. It just means you're taking a step back for self-preservation, right? Like, self-preservation's got to be number one, because being a martyr doesn't get anybody anywhere. I spent 40 years doing it. It didn't work out well. It's not about self-sacrificing. It's about, I think every relationship, no matter what it is, friendship, romantic, I mean, go across the board. There has to be some type of interdependence, right? There has to be interdependency. And that needs to be the goal, right? Each side needs to be independent on their own to come together to be something independently together, right? To build something stronger. And to me, that's the only solution. And it takes unconditional love to be in that space in some capacity. But it's not easy to show, right? And it's not easy to be there, because we all are human in some capacity. We all have at least part of us. And the ego gets involved at times. We get emotional. We get hurt. We want to pout and stomp. And, I feel like it's an ever-evolving process. I don't think anything is constant. I just don't. I think it ebb and flows. I think everything does. But then if we start judging ourselves for that, how are we loving ourselves?
Right. Well, and I do think there's, like you're saying, like, I think sometimes the way we love someone unconditionally is stepping back, stepping away, saying that this isn't healthy for either of us. And because if I stay, it's not going to be unconditional love, right? It's going to be judgment and resentment and all this other stuff that's going to come out of it. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to love someone unconditionally when it means, right, that's there's a parting of ways.
Yes. Yes.
I think, so does it mean it's conditional love? No, often not. Sometimes I'm sure it does for some people, but really the unconditional love is like, how much do I love you? How much do I love me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm willing to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Leave this and knowing that I love you unconditionally. And I think that's a thing that happens in a lot of friendships and relationships is we stay because we're good people, right? And we're going to support someone through this, and we're going to love them through it, and we're going to be there. And a good person, I can be a martyr and all of that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we end up staying for all those internal report card reasons. And what ends up brewing is exactly the opposite of unconditional love.
Yeah. I want to
No, go ahead, Kelly.
We've used the word self-preservation a couple of times, and I want to make sure we're intentional about our words. To me, that feels like a fear statement. Self-preservation, like I have to protect myself or whatever. When in reality, what we're saying is, and you both said this, we're talking about matching energy, right? We're talking about, hey, we're on the same journey, or we're on a journey where our energy matches, we're bringing each other up, we're elevating, we're uplifting, right? We're operating in love. Versus a fear statement is things like self-preservation, or, worried about it, whatever it is. I think that is always my check and balance. Am I operating out of fear, or am I operating out of love? This decision that I'm making, whatever it is this coming from fear of rejection or getting hurt, or am I operating out of love? So in those questions, in those times where you're with someone and you're looking and saying, something doesn't feel right, we're not matching energy, how you respond to that, like you're saying, Nancy, sometimes the unconditional, the way to love someone unconditionally is to recognize we don't match energy. I love you, but for whatever reason, we're not matching right now. I'm going to let you go in your own way, because the best thing for us, because we're not uplifting each other, we're not bringing each other up, the best thing for both of us is to let go of that connection, whatever. And maybe at some point we'll
Right.
When our energy does match, when our vibration does match.
And I'm going to step in on the self-preservation because I will say, yes, I can see where that's a place of fear for a lot of people. There are times, like we're talking energy, like literally it's self-preservation. Because if I say this connection of what's being sucked out of me, like
boundary, right? You're saying, hold on, time out. Yeah.
Like I could stay here and lose myself and my energy can completely be depleted and even potentially replaced by the other person's energy, which is not mine and not healthy for me, right? Or do I self-care my way out of it? But I will say that sometimes self-preservation is exactly what it feels like. And I don't feel it's from fear. I think it's from knowing. Like it's that primal knowing of like, no. You stay here and, you know.
We know where this road leads.
Exactly. You know exactly where it's going. You know, you lose yourself completely. You know that, you know, again, I've told the story of, you know, I remember being in couples therapy and like literally pounding on my chest and yelling at my ex-husband, like, what more do you want from me? I have nothing left to give. Take it. What do you want? Take it. Like there is nothing left. Yeah. Right. And there was a moment of self-preservation somewhere in that, romantic relationship, this marriage, where I didn't step back. I didn't heed that warning of, you know, and it ended up in a very real place. Do I fear going back there? Of course, there's some fear of going back there. It's not a good place, but the self-preservation, the step back is from a place of knowing. And maybe that's right there. That's my unconditional love for myself. Yeah. Right. That piece of self-preservation of saying, no, I can stay here and I can keep putting my energy into you. You're a sieve and eventually I will have no energy. So the energy is going to flow the opposite way and I'm going to embody you and your energy. I could do that. I could do a lot of things. You know, I'm really capable of doing a lot of things, you know, to cope and survive. But my self-love says no, right? This isn't this. You could do that, but you're not going to. You're not going to sacrifice.
Yeah. That's where I'm going to agree with actually what Nancy just said. Is self-preservation is self-love. Because the reality is you have to come first. The reality is you can only give out what you have in your tank. It doesn't mean you can't show love, but you can only give out the amount you have in your tank. And if you're giving out too much, then you can't fill anyone else, or you can't be there for anybody else. You can't even receive from anybody else when you get that low. Right?
My job is not to fill anyone else. Because if they're that void, right, already I'm in this self-preservation mode of like, if I am filling you up.
But there's an exchange, Nancy. Every phone call is an energy exchange. Every conversation is an exchange. Every interaction in our life is an energy exchange. Seeing Kelly in person yesterday was an energy exchange. The thing is, you were both.
If she was someone else, the energy exchange may have been me giving my healing, loving, great energy over to someone, and what they're giving back to me is not, you know.
But what I'm saying is self-preservation at that point would be to leave, which is really showing yourself self-love.
No, I agree. I agree with that.
So rather than giving it a negative connotation and saying that self-preservation is negative or fear, it's just an awareness of self-love. Taking a step back is an awareness of self-love. I think the key to all of this is being aware of what you need, what you have, and where you want to go.
Right. And you said something about like, okay, if like it's always an energy exchange in response to my saying, well, if someone is so depleted that I'm giving them energy, right? I'm always giving energy. The energetic exchange is always there. But if someone's so depleted that they are needing my energy to be, right? Then again, yes, there's always an exchange. Yes, there's this piece of self-preservation, and maybe the word is self-love, right? Maybe it is self-preservation, but it's self-love. And if we change it to no, this is an act of self-love, not self-preservation. Yes, it is accomplishing that. But like I said, I can't come into someone's energy field, their life, and they're so empty that it requires me to fill their energy. Because again, if you're empty and you have nothing to give back to me, well, yeah, then I really do end up depleted. Right. And it's very one-sided, and we've all been there, you know, when one person's making the effort and the other is not. Or I start to take on your energy, it's if I let myself get to a place, I don't take on your needing to be healed energy and turn it into something positive. I just take on your needing to be healed energy.
And again, I think it's just a reframe, right? Like, we talk about reframes all the time. I mean, I'm constantly working on reframes because,
intentional with our words. Yeah.
It is. And I just think that we need to really start addressing the self-love again, right? Because sometimes self-love is walking away from something that's unconditional. Sometimes self-love is walking away from something that's great, because at the end, it's taking something else from you, right? Sometimes you just don't know what to do, and you just got to follow your intuition. And then, but when the warning signs start coming, you just have to be self-aware enough to understand it. And you have to be there, and you have to be present to yourself enough. I really believe this all comes down to self-awareness. I think self-awareness is the key to all of this. And there's been many times over the last year that I have not been self-aware because I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be because I knew what I was doing was wrong. I didn't want to be self-aware. And that's when it went from self-love to preservation, right? But when I'm aware and I do something, I know my limit today. I know what I can do and still be full for myself. I know what I can do and still work on myself. When I shut down for that, 10 days basically, where I did almost nothing, that was because I didn't follow my own limitations. I didn't listen to my body. I was self-aware in every way except for physically. But you have to be self-aware on all levels. You can't hide from one, because you break down there the minute you do.
Absolutely. And again, I alluded to it earlier, this places where you're leaking energy, right? You really have to be really aware to see, when it's small leaks.
Mm-hmm.
When it starts to be like cracks in the dam, of course we all, we find, we're like, oh, look, there it is,
Yeah.
right? And I think even the most aware of people can miss that, right? We can miss those small places of leaking energy because they can look like places of I'm helping, I'm supporting, I'm encouraging, I'm cheerleading, I'm loving. But again, if I'm not getting back from someone, I'm leaking energy. And when the dam is about to break, oh, sure, I'll know.
But okay, but I also think it's important to say that not everybody can return what you're giving. So there is a big part of this that you need to know how to ground center yourself and receive from universal energy to be able to fill yourself back up also. Now, if it's the same individual and it's a constant drain, that's a different story. But if you're just coming across people that aren't aware enough, don't know, and aren't there, then that's allowed. They're not doing it intentionally. We just
I agree. And I will say, like, I come across people all the time. I mean, in the work I do, I should come home every day completely drained. And there's days I come home tired and I replenish, right? I do pull from source energy. Those are the nights I sit on my couch in my bathrobe, cuddle a cat and, close my eyes at 8:30 because I'm tired, but then I feel better the next day. I think where I have the tendency to leak energy when I'm leaking energy is definitely with someone I love, right?
Those closest to us.
Right. That's closest to us that I feel, quote unquote, needs my energy, like needs the buoying. And no, not everybody's going to be able to give back what I give, but you don't have to match my energy exactly perfectly in the same amount or the same type of energy. But when you're with someone who is receiving your energy and is really taking it in, is really in a place of wanting and growing and reciprocating in a way that they can do that. And then there's the place where, you just sort of try to do it for both of you.
Yeah.
And it looks really loving and generous. But ultimately, there's a different quality to it.
So we recognize that the reality that energy is limitless, right? That we know how to tap in, we know how to, re-energize ourselves and recharge and whatever. But we are also recognizing that there are those energy vampires, right? That hijack, that they've got a cord into us that they're constantly pulling from our energy, and whether they are returning it or we're not getting an equal energy input elsewhere, it is draining, like you're saying, right? And so, A, we learn to protect ourselves in those situations. B, we learn to cut those cords as we recognize it, as we see whether it's a leak or the dam's breaking, whatever. Like, we recognize those things and we cut those cords and we do what we need to protect our energy, and we constantly are recharging. We're constantly recognizing that energy isn't limitless, that we can give and we can give and we can give, and complete and constantly regenerate.
And I think there's a setup here in society for failure in this way, because the idea of the more selfless you are, the better human you are, right? Like you think of,
especially for women.
Like I can be there for everyone. I can, there is that setup. Please don't walk on the computer. There is that setup, right? That the more you give, the more selfless you are, and that self-care is selfish. I think there's a setup for failure there in the system. And I also think most people will look at someone who's really selfless, like you look at Gandhi, right? But you only see one side of it. You don't see the connection to the source energy. You don't see all the places where the cords have been cut. And so they can give selflessly without depleting. But I certainly think, yes, especially for women, we're supposed to be everything to everyone. But when we turn around and try to be something for ourselves, right, we get shamed. If you want to go on a girls' trip instead of be with for a weekend, if you have kids, right, you're a bad mom. There's just right. But a boys' trip is great. A boys' trip is always great. And I'm making sweeping generalities here, but I do believe that, there's a piece that doesn't.
And I think that narrative is changing somewhat as we talk more, as we really focus on the importance of self-care and having these practices and things like that. I do feel like societally we're becoming more and more aware and accepting of women prioritizing their own self-care, and that mental health is a real thing that we need to be addressing on a constant basis before burnout and all those other things.
Yeah, that piece of, and again, mental wellness is not, you get there, you get a plaque, you put it on your wall and you're done, right?
It's a practice.
It's a practice. And truly a practice, because it's a constantly evolving piece, right? Of what do I need in this moment? What am I going to try on? What am I going to practice with? What am I going to discover? Is it something I already know, or is it time for me to pick up a different tool and, again, practice and be aware of what's happening?
And what is it that you're doing to recharge? What is it that you're doing to regenerate that energy so that you are capable of giving?
Right, that you have the ability to.
I like what you said, because I think that this is something that is just only recently become apparent to me, that I have these things that, and we've talked about it on a few other, I think we talked about it on the island, but I have these things that are my practices that I know that this is what recharges me. But then lately there's like, why isn't this working? This is what I always do. This is, why isn't this working? I think it's important to recognize that as we are growing, evolving human beings, our needs and what we do for energy changes, right? What we do to recharge can change, and that's okay. It doesn't mean there's something wrong. It just means we're growing and evolving, and we need to be aware that our needs are going to grow and evolve also.
I think
that's not something that I recognized until just recently.
Right, and I think I recently had definitely a dip in my mood where everything I was trying didn't seem to be working. So it's like, okay, well, what have I not tried? What have I, what have I forgotten about? Maybe I haven't. It's like the pair of shoes that gets buried in my closet, and I love them. I wear them every day, and they got buried further in the back, and I see them again and realize, wow, I haven't worn those in forever. I love those, right? What? And for me, one of the big practices that I'm changing is not necessarily asking for help, but letting people know where I am. Right? Because there's definitely a place in it where I don't know how you would help me. Right? But I can let you know what's going on with me.
Being okay, not being okay, and saying, no, I'm not okay, but
I'm okay not being okay.
Yeah. That's a really new thing too, right? Being able to say, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And I think if the three of us all had individual conversations with Mark about this question, he would look at us and say, why are you trying? And he would look at us and say, why do you keep trying to force things? Why do we keep trying to create ways? Why don't we just get out of our way and allow it to happen? I think in some ways we make things a lot more complicated than it has to be. My routine when I first met Mark was so regiment. It was so strict and just so it had to be this way. And what I learned from Mark is, thank you for announcing it for the whole world to hear, child. Go pee. Enjoy. What I've learned from Mark is it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be difficult. And maybe it's not as much as us looking as it is just getting out of our own way. Right? And he always gave me that example. I don't know if he gave either of you guys this example, but the pipe, when we're in the pipe, we're blocking our own pipe of energy. Okay, so here's the visual that he gave me. That we are a channel, right? From the universe, from source, from God, whatever you want to call it. We're a channel. And he visualizes a pipe. And he says when we're running low on everything, when we're empty, when we're not feeling as we need to feel on a daily basis, we are the block in the pipe. And his simplification for me was get the fuck out of the way.
Well, it's like stepping on the hose, right? It's you're the one stepping on the hose or kinking the hose.
Exactly. So maybe we're making it too complicated. And I have to tell you, my life has been so much simpler since my routine has gotten so much more lax. It doesn't mean I don't meditate. It doesn't mean I don't do my gratitudes. It doesn't mean I'm not writing and reading. And I mean, I've been up since 3 a.m. I spent 2 hours meditating this morning. I wrote for 45 minutes. I read for an hour. I couldn't go back to sleep. So I did those things. It put me in a great headspace. I mean, I'll probably fall on my face within an hour, but it's okay. I was really grounded, really centered in a good place. He really broke it down so simply that I just need to stop trying so hard because I'm trying to micromanage my energy and I'm trying to micromanage what my purpose is by trying to control my energy. Why do I need to control that? How about there's just days that we're not going to have as much energy? How about there's days that we're going to have a surplus? How about there's days that we're doing more things in one direction than we used to, and it's just taking a toll on us? And I'm so proud of her. She's the only child I have that flushes the toilet. She runs back to the bathroom to flush. Now, if I could train the other two, it would be great. It's like, in my mind, it's simplified. It doesn't mean that works for everyone, right? But I'm so over analytical and I'm such a self-judger that if I know, Nancy, that's hard to believe. I get it. It's hard to understand and believe. I can see the look. But breaking it down that simply and just allowing it to be has made my life so much easier.
I think there's lots of purpose in that and a great need for it, but there are some things that challenge me, and it's not because I'm making them complicated. It's because it's a place of learning and growth and me being challenged, right? Being pushed to do some of the work here, or it's so I think allowing and not being tied to an outcome, those are things that are very important, absolutely. But there are times where I have to sort of step up and say, this is not one of those situations where my being passive is going to benefit me.
Yeah.
Yes.
and just reevaluate. Like sometimes it's okay to reevaluate and say, okay, what my normal practice, whether and I'm not the person who has a crazy routine or whatever. It's, when I need to recharge, I do my thing, and if that doesn't work, then I'm asking myself, okay, what's different? Why is what I normally do to recharge not working? And I think it's not a struggle thing. It's not a I'm forcing. It's not a I'm controlling. It's just sitting back and recognizing and checking in with yourself and saying, okay, what do I need? What is it that I need to recharge or whatever it is? I wanted to say, Mike, you mentioned Mark several times, and I don't know if everyone who's watching knows who you're talking about. It's Mark Wynn, he's the coffee shaman, and he's going to be on Padurano's show Tuesday or Wednesday.
Oh, no, Tuesday. Tuesday's going to be amazing. It's going to be Charisse, Andrea, and Mark and me.
Yeah, and what are you talking about?
I don't know. I don't even know how I fit in with that group.
So anyway, Mark Wynn, that's who he's talking about. He's the coffee shaman, and he's
amazing.
Great
all three of them. Yeah, I mean, all of us are. I mean, our whole group is. We're pretty fortunate to know each other. I got to say, I feel very lucky to know each and every one of you, and the ones in the comments too. We're very fortunate to have a very supporting family.
Yeah, we absolutely have beautiful community around us. Beautiful, beautiful community around us. And, Kelly, when you were saying your whole thing about reevaluate, what came to me was, well, if I'm self-caring, it's the second pen she's knocked off the table. If my self-care isn't working, maybe I've come to the wrong conclusion. Right? The thing that I'm struggling with may not really be the thing I'm struggling with.
Yep.
And to honor that and allow space for that to be like, okay, this usually works when I feel depressed, when I feel anxious, whatever it is, about things like this. And it's not working because, again, go deeper. This isn't truly, this isn't about the depression. This is about, right, is it the fear underneath? What is it below till I get to, again, those chords, whether it's cording myself to something else outside of me, or I also have a lot of cords that I've had to cut that are within me.
Attachment to things.
Yeah, to certain things. And, okay, so dealing with depression would be easy, quote unquote. For me, I have my patterns.
You have those tools. Mm-hmm.
Right, I have the tools. So let's make it depression.
Yep.
But when it's not shifting, why is it not shifting? Or the other question I will ask myself is, what am I still getting out of it? Because if I know something is not serving me and I've made the commitment to make a change or grow with it and it's not happening, what am I still getting out of it? Because that's the piece that I need to understand, because that's what's holding me, in the here instead of the moving forward piece. And I think that's,
what am I learning from this, or what am I supposed to be learning from this, or how am I growing from this, or whatever it is.
Right. And not abandoning the thing, being like, oh no, I guess it's not this, it must be this. Right? It's easy to do that as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
But let me preface, let me say something also, right? Like where I'm at with my energy work and where I've been spiritually and how connected I am, like this is years. This is 15 years of me working on this, being in touch with it, understanding it, knowing these things. So maybe when I'm communicating things on my level or where I'm at this point with it. So I also want to say that as well, because maybe I didn't think that through before making that comment. So maybe, what works for me might not work for everyone else.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think I'm telling you, the biggest thing for me today is being that hyper acute self-awareness around my core values. Because when I take one wiggle away from any one of my core values, doesn't matter how small the wiggle is, they all start rumbling and I get away from my energy starts draining, I start beating myself up, and it just starts spiraling. Being that aware of my core values and sticking within them and living into that daily is that important. And being that acute awareness around it. Because even making a disparaging comment in confidence today irks me. Because it's just not who I am at my core. right? So I try to reframe that and correct it on the spot. Sometimes I even go out of my way to own it to the person, even though they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, you're insane. Because people don't do that today. But for me, I need to stay in that space. That's my space. That's where I'm at my fullest and whole self. You know, so that's what I need to stay for me today where I'm at. And right, my energy thing and how I, do my energy work and everything else around that might be a completely different level than where others' awareness around it is. So that might have been unfair statements. So I wanted to
So I think it's like you've said a couple important things. We're all on our own journey. What works for you may not work for somebody else. I want you to talk about levels of things, because it implies some like hierarchy or whatever, and we're all on our own journey. Like every one of us has our own path and our own journey, and those things that anchor us. For you, your core values are what anchor you. Like when you're aligned with your core values, that you are your best highest self. That isn't what works for everyone, right? That's not that works for you. That is your, just like some people attach themselves to a certain religion and a certain dogma. What works for you doesn't necessarily work for everyone else. And you said that. I think that's really important. But just recognizing that we're all on our own journey, every single one of us. And there's no like better or worse, and I'm further along than you are, and whatever it is, like that doesn't exist. And we have to like recondition our programming, reprogram ourselves to stop thinking in that way. Well, I meditate every day, and I don't eat meat, and I don't drink anymore, or whatever it is. So that means I'm further along in my journey than you are. That's bullshit. That doesn't exist.
Right. Well, and that's that report card, right? Where we have some system that tells us if we're doing it right or not, and that there's a certain way to do it. And we'll come back to this, but what jumped to my mind when Mike, you're talking about core values is there are certain core values we are more comfortable doing than others. And so that's going to impact, right? Depending on where you are in the journey and which ones you're most comfortable being in, right? You can be operating from a core value, but it may also be because that's your comfortable core value. And it's not an unimportant core value, but it may not really be the one that's being challenged at that moment. You need to draw from, but if you're not comfortable being with the other one, right? Again, there's this dynamic that's happening again. But yeah, there's a core card that there is a right way, there's a wrong way, and that, again, I say about my meditation all the time. If you want to look at my meditation practice, it's laughable, right? To what you think meditation should look like. Yeah. But it works for me.
And I promise you, my meditation isn't typical either, right? My meditation is what works for me because of years and years of trial and error, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that I can't sit in the car and meditate for 30 seconds and be in a better space than 2 hours of meditating this morning because I was so overtired and just had to get centered, right? Yeah. So that's just what works for me today. But every one of us needs to voice how we do it for ourselves because that's the only way others can learn to find out ways of what works for them.
Right. And to know that there are people who are quote unquote successful in doing these things that don't look like what we've been taught it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. There is no right way. There's only the way that works for you, right? Or our individual self, maybe saying you doesn't make sense, but there's only what works for us. And we all need to learn what works for us. As if we're on the journey of learning, then we're all on the journey. That's all that matters. You have to be on the journey of being self-aware and wanting to understand and wanting to learn more about ourselves. Because you can't learn anything about anyone else until you learn about yourself.
What I find challenging for me is when I am on my journey, that I am so invested in someone else's journey that I don't allow them theirs. Right? I can give up needing to know the outcome or there being a certain outcome for me, but like I definitely have to be very aware and struggle with when someone I care deeply about, right?
Back to unconditional love.
Right, exactly. It's right. It absolutely. It's all together. But
Stop.
pieces of like, I'm not sitting here. I'm not standing here at all. I'm not sitting here saying I have all the answers.
No.
I'm not sitting here saying like, this is how it's to be done and I figured it out.
Yeah.
That is not the case at all for me. And that's why these conversations are important for me. But I don't stand here as an expert, right? I can share my experience and learn from others and start to recognize the places where my energy, my work energy could be directed in a very productive way.
Yep.
And I think the only thing that we can ever be an expert of is what works for ourselves, right? Because all we can do when you're a guide, when you're a coach, when you're a mentor for somebody else, you're just showing them how it works for you.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's going to work for them the same way.
Giving them tools, offering them tools and resources to, hey, this is what worked for me or what worked for other people, even if it doesn't necessarily work for you, you know, here are some options. Try this.
Giving people the place to try things on. And I just looked at the time, so I apologize because we are over an hour already. It is a wonderful conversation, and I think there's so much here. And I hope that everyone that was here listening now goes and talks to somebody else about this. Like, that would be my call to action. Like, go take this from here and talk to somebody about it and hear more of how people are thinking about it and what they do and what their experience has been. So that this energy keeps flowing and this idea keeps moving, further and further out from us and more into like the world. So that would be my ask of you is, even if it's a brief conversation, go talk to someone about the show that you saw tonight and what they were talking about and some of the things that were said. Before we say goodnight fully, Kelly, and Mike, do you have any final words? I'm looking at comments. Sorry.
No, I love your call to action. I think that's great. Let's, go out and continue the conversation. The only way that we, change the world is through this like a viral thing, right? Like, go spread the energy.
Right. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything else to add, except, I think at the end of the day, it's all about learning ourselves the best that we can. We need to learn about ourselves to such an acute level that we understand what our needs are, what our wants are, how we can get there, and what works for us, right? Because, again, there has been many times that I've judged people because they weren't doing it a way that I thought was right for them. Mm-hmm. Well, who am I to say what's right for them, right? That's a great boa. That's just like perfect. It's like the best scarf in history.
It's fantastic that it's like 80 degrees in Los Angeles.
Perfect.
My fur coat on.
and it's going to be in the 30s tomorrow morning here. So, welcome to Arkansas. At the end of the day, we need to understand that our path is our path, of somebody else's is somebody else's. And all we can do is guide them to the best of our ability based on where we're at. We've got to meet them where they're at to the best of our ability, but that's not always easy either. Yeah. Because you've got to be self-aware enough to know that they're in a different place.
Right. And you have to know where you end and the next person begins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
that's a whole nother conversation, right? We can't guide others when we're in a place of not knowing. Yeah, that's a whole. Okay, so
that's a mini series. That might be another summer mini series for you.
There you go. We're going to say goodnight, and I'm going to speak for all of us when I thank you all for being here. Thank you for showing up in the comments. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for welcoming us and choosing to spend some of your Sunday night with us. We appreciate and love you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.